When I stepped into the bathroom, something shiny on the carpet caught my attention, reflecting a ray of sunlight sneaking through the blinds. I bent down to look, careful since I was barefoot and unsure if there was something sharp lying around. Hannah hadn't said anything about dropping anything in here, but you never know. A small foil circle was almost hidden against the carpet's color, only noticeable because of the light hitting it just right. I crouched down and picked it up. It was the backing from a pill blister pack, the kind you usually toss aside after popping a pill out. As I flipped it over, I saw the number 2 on one side. Tuesday, I thought, since today was Wednesday, meaning this pill was likely from yesterday. I don't take any meds. I'm healthy at 35, and so is Hannah. We both just had our yearly physicals, and everything was fine. So, what was a pill backing doing in our bathroom? A few possibilities crossed my mind, but what stuck out was birth control. I'd had a vasectomy 2 years ago, after our second kid, so I assumed Hannah had no need for the pill anymore. She's never had bad cramps or issues with her period. Lucky her, so why was there birth control in the house? For a moment, my thoughts took a dark turn. Maybe she was sick and hadn't told me. But then I remembered how healthy we both were after our recent checkups. The answer had to be close by. If the foil was here, the pills couldn't be far. Locking the door behind me, I started searching. Eventually, I found them hidden in a tampon box beneath some aspirin. It was the same brand of birth control she used before my surgery, back when we weren't trying for kids. Why was she on them again? Only one disturbing reason made sense. She must have been with someone else, someone who could get her pregnant. She'd been cheating. Hannah and I had been together for 9 years. We met at a bar when I had just finished college and was working my way toward becoming an engineer. She was working as an assistant at the time. We didn't click right away, but she agreed to a dinner date. Hannah's about my height, 5 feet 10 inches, and used to be an athlete with a slim frame and not much up top. But what really stood out about her, in my opinion, was her incredible rear. We dated for a year before tying the knot when I was 26. Now we've got 2 kids, ages 5 and 2, and after the second, I got the vasectomy. I thought we had the perfect little family. Hannah went back to work after both maternity leaves, determined to stay in the workforce, even though childcare costs were steep. I co-founded an engineering firm with some buddies, and though we weren't rolling in money, I enjoyed what we did. But now, after finding that pill backing in the bathroom, everything seemed off. I put the foil back where I found it and decided not to confront her right away. Jumping the gun wouldn't help me. I needed to think it through and gather proof. I had to be smart about this. I want to work like usual, but my mind was running a mile a minute. Who was she seeing? When did this start? How long had it been going on? Was it someone from her office? Maybe her boss? Were those old suspicious messages on her phone from him? And the worst thought crept in, were my kids even mine? Even though I was filled with anger, betrayal, and confusion, I knew I had to focus on getting answers. I hit the internet and ordered DNA testing kits, figuring I could check if the kids were really mine without tipping her off. I also bought surveillance gear, tiny voice recorders for her car and purse, and small cameras I could hide around the house. I wasn't sure if she was meeting anyone at home, but I had to be certain. I also needed to get into her phone. I found a tool that could clone it, letting me see her messages, emails, and calls without her knowing. It took a few days for everything to arise. During that time, I kept a close eye on Hannah. She acted completely normal. Our intimate life was still about the same, once or twice a week on the weekends. She didn't rush to take showers when she got home, and nothing in her behavior seemed off. Either she wasn't cheating, or she was really good at hiding it. Maybe she'd been doing this so long it felt normal to her. By Friday morning, all the packages had arrived at my office, which helped avoid any awkward questions. I got the DNA kits, recorders, cameras, a new phone, and the cloning tool. Ready to put my plan into action, I left work early. At home, the au pair was feeding the kids dinner, so I used the opportunity to plant the cameras, one in the bathroom, another in the living room, and one in the bedroom aimed at the bed. Later, when I was helping the kids with their bedtime routine, I discreetly took DNA samples from them and myself, mailing them off right away for testing. Hannah came home at her usual time, and we went through our typical evening routine, small talk over dinner without really listening to each other. After she hit the shower, I installed the voice recorders in her car and purse, then cloned her phone while she was busy. I checked her messages and emails, but there was nothing incriminating. Either she was extra careful, or she hadn't actually cheated. I couldn't tell for sure. The weekend went by without a hitch. Everything was normal. We were even intimate like usual, early in the mornings before the kids were awake. The pill pack showed missing days, so I knew she was taking them. Monday came, and I casually mentioned I'd be working from home that day, giving me a chance to keep a closer eye on things. She left for the office, giving me a chance to pull the flash drives from the cameras and review the footage. The bathroom camera confirmed what I already suspected. She was taking the pills. But the bedroom footage revealed something I didn't expect. On Saturday evening, while I was busy cooking dinner, she took a shower in our bedroom. And that's when I saw her texting on a second phone, one she hadn't left in her bag. She had hidden it in the vent. I checked the vent afterward, but the phone wasn't there anymore, meaning she must take it with her when she leaves. I needed to get my hands on that phone. This was the first real proof I had that something was going on. Looking at the footage from that morning, I watched her pull the secret phone from the vent and slip it into her bag before heading off to work. That evening, when she came home and took another shower, I checked her bag. It was phone-free again. Knowing she likely stashed it in the vent, I quietly retrieved it from Lily's room, cloned it, and returned it without a sound. I almost got caught when she stepped out of the shower and found me near Lily's bed, gently stroking her hair. "What's going on?" she asked softly. I shook my head, playing it cool. "Sometimes I just like sitting with them," I whispered. "It reminds me of how lucky I am to have such wonderful kids." She smiled at me, teasing, "You're such a sentimental old man." She nudged me gently. "Let's go before you wake her." The next day, I finally looked at the clone phone. That's when my world came crashing down. Sitting in my office chair, tears streamed down my face as I read the messages. I didn't even hear the intercom buzzing. Eventually, Emily, my secretary, knocked softly and came in. Always professional, Emily was a no-nonsense type, dressed conservatively, with her slim build, red hair, and striking green eyes. We'd always kept things strictly professional, never crossing any lines. She'd once confided in me about a former partner's mistreatment, explaining that she stayed at the firm because I treated her with respect. That partner, angry at the situation, had demanded I fire her, giving me an ultimatum. Her or him. I chose her and ended up with 60% ownership, losing a partner, but keeping Emily's loyalty. Emily quietly left the room for a moment, then returned with some napkins. "Tell me," she asked gently. I showed her the phone. The messages between Hannah and some unnamed person weren't just casual, they were explicit. They described secret meetings and intimate moments, the kind of details only a long-term lover would know. It was clear from the way Hannah talked about her life that I didn't even exist in her world anymore. "Do you know who it is?" Emily asked, keeping her tone professional. I shook my head. "How did you find out?" she asked next. I explained everything. The foil in the bathroom, the pills, and how I'd pieced it all together. The words just poured out, and she listened quietly, holding my hand for the first time in all the years we'd worked together. "You need more information," she said calmly. "The kids' DNA results will be back by Wednesday. Can you wait until then?" I wasn't sure, and I told her so. She nodded in understanding. "Our team in Portland needs you this week," she said, booking a flight for me without asking. "You'll be back by Thursday." I could barely think straight, but I let her take control. She took my phone and sent a message to Hannah, telling her I'd be away on business. Hannah responded quickly, saying she understood and loved me. Emily handed back my phone and made a call on hers. "Rachel," she said into the phone. "Emily here." "Yes. Thank you. When can you meet?" She arranged a meeting for that afternoon, directing me like she often did at work. It was almost a relief not to have to think for myself. When I came out of the bathroom, Emily was holding my jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You have an appointment with my friend," she replied, leading the way. Rachel was Emily's best friend and also her divorce lawyer. Emily had hired her after discovering her husband had been cheating with one of his employees. As we sat in Rachel's office, Emily explained my situation to her, while I just sat there, feeling like I was in a fog. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself. Rachel was sharp and efficient, gathering all the details and laying out my options without judgment. "Jacob," she said, snapping me out of my daze. "Do you have a plan?" Her question kicked my brain into gear. "Take them both down," I said, expecting them to be shocked. But Emily only smiled, and Rachel didn't bat an eye. "That's not an option legally," Rachel explained calmly. "But we can explore other routes." She laid out 3 paths for me. First, do nothing and keep pretending everything was fine for the sake of a peaceful life. Second, go for an amicable divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, dividing our assets, and paying child support. Or third, go nuclear. File for divorce on grounds of infidelity, contest paternity, and gather as much evidence as possible. My mind was racing. Option 1 wasn't happening. I wasn't going to sit back and be the pathetic guy who got cheated on. Option 2 felt too passive. I'd invested too much into my life to walk away quietly. Option 3, I said firmly, go nuclear. Rachel smiled. All right then, I'll start the paperwork. I suggest you keep a low profile for now and continue gathering evidence. We need to know who, when, and where. She asked to keep the phone, telling me it wasn't going to do me any good anymore. I handed it over without hesitation. Emily and I left Rachel's office, and she took me to a small, family-owned hotel, booking me a room. Go take a shower and order something for dinner, she instructed, taking control again. I'll bring you some things later. I moved through the motions like a robot, my world crumbling around me, all while I sat in that hotel room, ordering room service like I was on autopilot. It seemed like the only way to deal with the pressure. 9 years of my life just gone in an instant. The worst part wasn't even her betrayal. It was how clueless I had been the entire time. How did I not see this happening? Was it her boss? The one she kept going back to after each maternity leave? She always said she valued her job and her independence. But now I couldn't help but wonder if that was just an excuse to stay close to him. I eyed the minibar in the corner, feeling tempted when Emily walked in. Don't even think about it, she said firmly. You need your head clear if you're going to figure this out. Getting drunk won't solve anything. A plan? I shot back, bitterness dripping from my words. I had a plan. I had a wife I loved, 2 kids I thought were mine, and now look at me. I'm just a guy who got cheated on, and I don't even know if my kids are mine. You want me to plan? Emily gave me a long look before glancing at her watch. Enough of that, she said in a no-nonsense tone. Your pity party's over. You remember all the challenges we faced starting the company? Things fell apart then too, but we didn't just give up. And how is that relevant to this? I muttered. Think about it, she pressed. Remember when the patent office lost our application? Or when the bank nearly foreclosed on us under pressure? Yeah, but that was different, I said. How? What was different? She asked, pushing me harder. I had something to fight for. I replied quietly. Back then, I had a family to take care of. She didn't miss a beat. And you still do. In fact, your family's bigger now. You've got 141 employees and their families depending on you to keep this business running. If Hannah takes half of what you own in a divorce, she could sell it to anyone, even Whitfield, and everything you built would be gone. Is that what you want? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was right. I couldn't just let everything crumble because of what Hannah had done. I needed to protect my future and the future of my kids, even if my marriage was shattered. The fog in my head started to lift, and for the first time in days, I felt some clarity. You're right, I said, my voice steadying. I need to take control of this situation. Emily gave a nod of approval. That's the Jacob I know. The one who looks ahead, who makes plans. That evening, we got to work. We talked through the options, and I briefly considered selling my shares to my partners. But Emily quickly shot that down. She was worried they'd run the company into the ground or sell it off. Instead, we settled on creating an offshore trust. I'd sell the company to the trust at full market value, then stay on as CEO with a nominal salary. It would protect the business from local jurisdiction and make me a paper millionaire once everything was finalized. On top of that, I decided to cash out my 401k and tap into the home equity. Since I had bought the house in my name before Hannah started working again, it was time to reassess its value. I made a list of things to do and called my lawyer, Ethan Morris, to set up a meeting. The next morning, after Emily left, I crashed hard and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, I saw a message from Hannah asking why I had left so suddenly. I replied, keeping it short, telling her I'd be back Thursday. I didn't add anything affectionate. I couldn't bring myself to. Emily arrived early, and after I showered, we grabbed breakfast at a local diner. Despite everything swirling around in my head, I tried to stay focused on the practical steps ahead. Emily let me know that Ethan had a slot open for us at 10 a.m., but she suggested we hit the bank first to take care of accessing my 401k and home equity. I get the need to consolidate my finances, I said as we sipped our coffee. But won't the courts still track my assets? Won't they make me split them with Hannah? Not if you don't have the assets when you go to court, Emily grinned. And that's where Vegas comes in. She explained her plan. Once I had the cash, I'd head to Vegas for a week, blow through the money, and then file for divorce. By the time we hit the courtroom, I'd look broke, deep in debt, and facing foreclosure. My salary would barely be enough to cover the basics. Unless, of course, the DNA test shows the kids aren't yours, she added. If they are, put your 401k into a trust for their college fund. Hannah won't be able to touch it. You might even end up getting alimony from her. When will we get the DNA results? She asked, looking me dead in the eye. I hesitated, pulling out my phone. They're supposed to be ready today, I said. I checked my email and saw a tracking link, but couldn't bring myself to click it. Can you check? I asked, handing her the phone. She scrolled through the information while I anxiously studied her face for any hint of what the results were. They're not ready yet, she said. It says they'll be available in 12 hours. She stood up, ready to move. Let's go. The bank should be open by now. The trip to the bank went smoothly. I liquidated my 401k, pulled equity from the house, and transferred everything into accounts in my name. I left our joint checking account untouched. There wasn't much in it anyway, just under $10,000. Later, when we met with Ethan, he brought up something I hadn't even thought about. You forgot about the marriage contract, he said. Marriage contract? I asked, confused. I didn't know we had one. It was part of the partnership agreement when you started the company. All the partners had to sign a prenup to protect the business if they got divorced, Ethan explained. It only covers company assets, not personal ones. As an employee, Hannah can only go after your salary and 401k. Ethan suggested I reinvest the equity from the house back into the company. Buy out one of your partners, he advised. Andrew's been talking about cashing out. You might need to borrow from the company pension fund to make up the difference, but we can adjust your salary to cover the loan repayments. Your assets will still be tied to the company, and they'll be safe. Sure, your credit might take a hit, and you'll lose half of what's left in your personal accounts. But beyond that, Hannah won't get anything. And how am I supposed to live? I asked. If my salary's going toward loan payments, how do I cover my expenses and take care of the kids? Ethan paused. Let's not discuss the kids just yet, he said carefully. Have you thought about what you'll do if they aren't yours? Will you stay involved in their lives? I looked away, feeling the weight of it all. I don't know, I admitted. I can't make that decision until I have all the facts. Well, don't forget about the lawsuit against her company, Ethan reminded me. Once that settles, it should give you enough to pay off the loan and restore your full salary. And if the kids aren't yours, you can go after their biological father for reimbursement, separate from the divorce settlement. I sighed. Could you reach out to Andrew for me? I don't think I'm up to it right now. Ethan nodded. I'll handle it and keep you updated. We shook hands, and as I walked out of his office, my mind was still racing with everything I needed to do. For a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. As we stepped outside, it seemed like things were starting to make sense, and a strange sort of satisfaction settled over me. But that moment didn't last long. The truth came crashing down again, reminding me why we were making these plans in the first place, and it left me feeling hollow inside. We found ourselves sitting in some diner for lunch when I finally worked up the courage to check my phone again. I clicked on the link in the email, then slid the phone over to Emily, studying her face, waiting for her reaction. Her voice was soft when she handed it back. I'm so sorry, Jacob. I had to see it for myself. The results were there, clear as day. Neither kid was biologically mine, though they both had the same father. The sting of losing both of them hit hard, but the anger, the rage over her betrayal, hit harder. She hadn't just lied to me about the kids. She'd also manipulated me into getting a vasectomy, sealing off any chance of real children of my own. Jacob, Emily snapped, pulling me back into the present. Now is not the time for this. Keep it together. We'll handle it. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to stop the fury from taking over. I wanted to scream, punch something, or worse. The thought of revenge crossed my mind more than once, even hiring someone to deal with the guy who fathered the kids I thought were mine. But Emily, now composed, grabbed my arm and led me out of the diner. Rachel called, she said as we walked to her car. She wants to see you. We headed straight to Rachel's office, and she didn't look surprised when we walked in. She went right into it. I've got a preliminary report from the private investigator, she said. Hannah had a visitor last night, A man stayed over at your house. I have cameras installed at home. I told her. I'll swap the flash drives, and we can see what's on them. Good, Rachel replied, nodding. Do it now. This footage could be critical. The au pair is with Grace and Owen at the play center, I said, thinking aloud. I can't go back home without raising suspicion. Hannah thinks I'm out of town for business. Rachel checked her phone. The au pair is still occupied. I'll monitor things and notify you if anything changes. We rushed back to my house, a 30-minute drive that felt like it took hours. Once inside, I switched out the flash drives, took a quick look around, but everything seemed normal. I didn't find anything out of place. We hurried back to Rachel's office. Reviewing the footage, I couldn't bring myself to watch the part where they were in the bedroom. I just couldn't face it. But then came the part one dreaded most. Mark Reynolds, her boss, entering the house using his own key. The sight of Owen running to him, calling him Daddy Mark, broke me. Tears flooded my eyes, and I just collapsed. Rachel stayed quiet as I fell apart, but Emily, surprisingly, hugged me while I sobbed into her shoulder. For the first time, she wasn't just the calm, composed one. She was trying to comfort me. After a while, I gathered myself as best I could. Do you want to rest? Rachel asked gently. I shook my head no. The sharpness of the pain dulled slightly, but in its place, the anger grew stronger. What's the next step? I asked, the words coming out cold. I've been looking into your wife's employment contract, Rachel explained. Her company has a strict no fraternization policy. Since her affair was with a senior manager, we have solid grounds to take legal action. We filled Rachel in on what my company lawyer had advised earlier, and she quickly got on the phone with him. Not long after, she received copies of our prenuptial agreement via email. This changes everything, she said after scanning the document. Your partner's strategy is spot on. If he's willing to sell his shares, you can invest everything you have into the company to shield it. We'll also go after her company for failing to enforce their own rules, him for emotional damages, her for falsifying the birth certificates, and both of them for all the child-related expenses. But it all depends on whether Andrew is willing to sell, I said. We're stuck until we hear from him. Emily drove me back to the hotel I'd been staying in. As soon as I walked into my room, there was a knock on the door. It was Emily again. Come on, she said, pushing me toward the door. You shouldn't stay here alone. Why not? I asked, feeling too drained to care. Because I know what you're like. You'll sit here and brood, or worse, hit the minibar. She replied with a firmness that didn't leave room for argument. I'm not leaving you alone right now. I packed up my things, and we headed out to her car. Where are we going? I asked, still indifferent. My place, she answered. You can stay in the spare room. I started to protest, but her glare stopped me cold. I'd never been to Emily's place before, and I was surprised when we pulled up. It wasn't far off from the size of my house, though it was all on one level. She led me to a room with its own bathroom. Take a shower and change your clothes, she instructed. Dinner's in half an hour. We ate mostly in silence. The food was probably great, but I couldn't taste it. My mind was racing, emotions swirling around inside me, but none of it was clear. Anger, emptiness, and a laser-focused drive to follow through on my plan were all I could feel. I was running on autopilot, just going through the motions to get things done. After dinner, just as I was thinking about what to do next, the phone rang. I tensed, half expecting it to be Hannah, but it wasn't. Hello. I answered, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Andrew, I said when I heard his voice. Why? He asked bluntly. Andrew and I went back years since university, in fact, where we'd worked together on a project that eventually became the foundation of our business. I had the bigger stake in the company because I had fronted more of the initial investment. Hannah's been cheating on me, I said, my voice flat. For how long? He asked, shocked. Since the beginning, I replied. And neither of the kids are yours? He paused for what felt like forever. So, you want to move all your assets into the company and use the prenup as your shield? I'll keep 5% and stay on as a consulting engineer, he offered. HR can take care of the details. The rest is yours. All right, I agreed. I'll have Ethan start drafting the paperwork. Jacob, he said, his voice softening a little. I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it'll get easier. Trust me, I've been there. You will get through this. It hit me then. I'd forgotten that Andrew went through his own divorce about 4 years ago. He hadn't talked about it much, but I knew it was rough. He had relied on his own prenup back then, too. The next morning, Emily woke me with a cup of coffee. Let's go, she said. There's still a lot to do. We headed straight to Ethan Morris's office. He'd already prepared the documents for me to buy out Andrew's share of the company. The whole transaction was done in under 30 minutes. I liquidated everything I had. My house equity, my savings, even my 401k. I also took out a loan against the company's pension plan to cover the rest. On paper, I now owed nearly $1 million. My salary was slashed in half, eaten up by deductions. Our next stop was Rachel's office. She took her time reviewing the buyout documents and looked satisfied when she finished. This is perfect, she said with a smile. I'll get the papers drafted today, and we can file them first thing Monday. Where do you want her served? She asked, and I didn't hesitate. Somewhere that'll embarrass her the most, I replied. If I could put it on a Super Bowl billboard, I'd pay for that gladly. Rachel chuckled, but remained focused. We'll serve her at work, she decided. Monday morning at 10, assuming the papers clear the court in time. If I file today, we should know by tomorrow afternoon. I nodded, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. What's next? Emily asked, taking charge like she always did. We've got 2 more stops before you head back to work and pretend you've been putting out fires in Portland, Rachel said, glancing at me. Can you hold out at home until Monday? I'll have to, I muttered, already dreading the idea. No need to guess, Emily said, cutting in. Just tell me what you need to make it through till then. I don't know, I admitted, feeling lost. Any good news? She asked with a small smile. Let's go. To my surprise, we pulled up at the medical center where I'd had all my checkups and the vasectomy. Why are we here? I asked, a bit confused. Didn't you say you wanted good news? She teased, giving me a knowing look. Come on. Inside, Emily arranged for me to see my doctor right away. As I walked into the consultation room, I glanced back at Emily, who stayed behind at first. Please, I gestured to her. Join me. She nodded and followed me in. Dr. Thompson didn't seem surprised to see her. He knew enough about my situation by now. Jacob, he began, I understand you're asking about a vasectomy reversal? My eyes widened. Is that even possible? I asked, turning to look at Emily, who had a slight smile on her face. Yes, Dr. Thompson assured me. It's very possible. There's about a 95% success rate for reversals, especially if it's been less than 3 years since the procedure. It's a longer surgery, done under general anesthesia, but the odds are good you could father children again. Tears sprang to my eyes at the thought. I had given up on the idea of ever becoming a father again, but now there was hope. I know it's a lot to take in, Dr. Thompson said gently, handing me a brochure with information about the procedure and its costs. Of course, it wasn't covered by insurance. If you decide to go through with it, we can schedule the necessary tests. Thank you, doctor. Emily cut in, taking the paperwork from his hand. We'll be in touch. She stood up, and I followed her out of the clinic, still processing what I'd just heard. Is this good enough news for you? Emily asked softly, smiling at me. Without thinking, I pulled her into a hug. Thank you. I whispered into her hair before stepping back quickly. Sorry. It's okay, Jacob, she said gently, not seeming to mind at all. As we got back into her car, she turned to me. One more stop, then it's back to work. I'd been to Mark Reynolds' house a few times over the years while Hannah worked for him. He and his wife, Lauren, lived in a gated community just outside the city, where they often hosted corporate events. When Emily and I arrived, Lauren was expecting us and welcomed us in without hesitation. She led us to what looked like Mark's office and motioned for us to sit down. How can I help you? Lauren asked, her attention focused directly on me. I hesitated, trying to find my voice. Finally, I managed to ask, Did you know? She sighed, her expression heavy with sadness. No, she admitted, shaking her head. I suspected, but I never had proof. I couldn't find anything solid enough to take to a lawyer. If I had, I would have taken him for everything he had. Join the club, Emily muttered under her breath. Lauren turned back to me. Do you have evidence? I nodded. Proof that none of the kids are mine, I said, my voice faltering as emotion threatened to choke me. I'm so sorry, Lauren said, genuine sympathy in her voice. She went on to share her own suspicions about Mark and Hannah over the years, but she admitted that all her efforts to uncover the truth had come up empty. She expressed regret for not taking action sooner, if only she had known for sure. What are you going to do now? She asked, curious about my plans. I hesitated. Should I tell her what I was planning to do, knowing that she might tell Mark when he returned? In the end, I decided I wanted Mark to be just as blindsided as I was. The real question is, what are you going to do? I asked her. Lauren didn't take offense at my reluctance to share. Fair enough, she said. Could you recommend a good divorce lawyer? Emily reached into her bag and handed over a business card. Thank you, Lauren said, taking the card. Will a week be enough? I nodded. That should be fine. Great, she said, standing up, signaling the end of our meeting. She gave me a brief hug and kissed my cheek. I'm so sorry, she repeated. Then, turning to Emily, she added, take care of him. He deserves better than what that woman did to him. Emily winced slightly at the affectionate comment, but said nothing. When we returned to the office, I spent the rest of the day catching up on tasks from Portland. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but determined. As I was wrapping up for the day, Emily knocked on my door, just like she always did. She poked her head in to say she was leaving, and her usual professional demeanor had returned. For some reason, it left me feeling lost. I thought there had been a growing connection between us, but maybe it was just in my head. I said goodnight, grateful for her help nonetheless. I worked late into the night, trying to stay busy. Around 8, Hannah messaged me, asking when I'd be home. I told her another hour or two, explaining that I needed to tie up loose ends from the trip. She replied that she'd probably be asleep by the time I got in and sent a string of kisses. I couldn't bring myself to reply. I kept working until nearly 11, hoping she'd be asleep when I finally got home so I wouldn't have to deal with her. When I got back, the house was dark, like everything was normal. I checked on Lily and Owen. Both of them sound asleep, and that's when the emotions hit me. I retreated to the bathroom to hide the tears. They were my children, but I still loved them. I wasn't ready to decide their future. How could I walk away from them now, after spending all these years thinking they were my pride and joy? Now, the kids were just constant reminders of Hannah's betrayal. I didn't know how things would play out, so I decided to wait. Sleep didn't come easily, and when I woke, Hannah was already gone. The housekeeper was tending to the kids, and my thoughts turned dark. Had she known all along that they weren't mine? The anger rose inside me, thinking maybe she was complicit in Hannah's cheating, a silent partner in her lies. By Monday, I told myself I'd make sure she faced consequences, maybe even ensure she never worked as an au pair again. But then I stopped myself. What was I doing? Blaming someone who likely had no control over the situation? It would just make a bad situation worse. If she had told me, she probably would have risked losing her job. Yet, she's taken good care of the kids for years, even before Lily was born. Maybe I was directing my anger at the wrong person. I headed to work. Emily was already there, completely back to business like nothing unusual had happened over the past few days. She told me she'd cleared my schedule for the day, something about marketing. She even brought our morning coffees, which was a first for her. Marketing? I asked, confused. Since when am I involved in that? She grinned, that rare smile of hers oddly comforting. We need a strategy, she said. It's the final part of Rachel's plan. What plan? I asked, still confused. Emily didn't miss a beat. We need to go public, she said, matter of fact. Tell everyone, her friends, family, her church group, everyone who knows her about what she's done. Let them know who she really is. I'll look like a fool, I protested. They'll see me as a man who was betrayed, raising another man's kids. You need to get ahead of this, Emily insisted. If you don't tell your side, Hannah will, and trust me, her version will paint you as the villain, probably saying you were abusive or unfit. Sure, people might have doubts, but speaking first will undermine her story. Emily had compiled a media package, evidence of Hannah's affair, the private investigator's report, the DNA test proving I wasn't the father, and, worst of all, footage from my house. One clip showed Owen calling Mark Daddy Mark. There were other videos too, from areas I hadn't reviewed yet, and frankly didn't want to. Later that morning, an email from Rachel came through. Lauren had provided Mark's DNA, and Rachel matched it with the test results, confirming that Mark was indeed the father of both kids. Kids, I thought, suddenly unable to think of them as mine anymore. We added this new information to the package Emily had prepared for our parents, Hannah's siblings, and her wider circle on Facebook and LinkedIn. Copies were set to be delivered by courier at 10 a.m. Monday, timed perfectly with everything else. All I had to do now was make it through the weekend. I channeled my frustration into a project. With my engineering background, it didn't take long to put together a small device, a motor with a timer and a battery. I set it to vibrate at our usual wake-up time of 6 a.m. and slipped it discreetly under Grace's pillow on Friday evening after the au pair had left. Everything went according to plan. Grace barged into our bedroom Saturday morning, interrupting any chance of closeness with Hannah. I smirked to myself, satisfied that I'd managed to keep busy all day by tackling the household tasks Hannah had neglected for so long. When she mentioned it, I casually remarked that they just needed to get done. That night, when Hannah tried to get close, I pretended to be fast asleep once she came back from the bathroom. By Sunday, my little device had interrupted Grace's sleep again, causing her to go back to Hannah's room in the middle of the night. Sunday was spent at the zoo with the kids. The whole day, I wrestled with my emotions, struggling to look at Hannah, the woman I'd loved, or thought I did, and the children I had treated as my own. More than once, I felt myself on the verge of breaking down, but I bit my cheek hard enough to draw blood, keeping it together. Somehow, I made it through the weekend. Monday arrived, and I was resolute. I told Hannah that I'd be working from home to discuss something with the au pair. As she left for work, I stayed glued to my laptop, pretending to be absorbed in emails, barely acknowledging her goodbye. After she was gone, I noted the time, 8:15 a.m. The au pair knocked on my office door, asking if she could take the kids to the play center. I told her no, surprising her by saying I wanted to keep the kids at home. Owen seemed disappointed, but didn't argue, though I could tell he had been looking forward to going. At around 9, Emily showed up at the house, catching me off guard. I let her in, and for the first time, I made coffee for her. By 9:30, we were on a conference call with Rachel. "Jacob," Rachel said seriously, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you should, but if you've changed your mind over the weekend, now's the time to speak up." "No," I said firmly. "I'm going through with it." "Then I'll see you on the other side," Rachel said, confirming that everything was set. I monitored my emails closely, waiting for confirmation that Hannah had been served at exactly 10 a.m. The first email came through right on time, then the second 3 minutes later, and the third 5 minutes after that. My phone rang, and I half expected it to be Hannah, but it was my mother instead. "Jacob," she said, her voice tense. "Hi, Mom," I replied. "What's going on?" she asked, clearly shaken. "Did you get the package I sent?" I asked her. "Yes," she answered. "Then you know as much as I do," I said. "Hannah's been cheating on me, probably for our entire marriage, with her boss. The kids aren't mine. I'm divorcing her." "Jacob, you can't," she pleaded. "No, Mom, I have to," I said firmly. "I have work to do. I've got other calls." I ended the call before she could protest further. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was Hannah. "Jacob," she said, her voice strained. "We need to talk." I stayed silent. "I'm coming home," she said, and with that, the call ended. "Hannah's on her way," I told Emily. "I'll step out," she offered. I wanted to ask her to stay, but the words wouldn't come out. I just looked at her. "Call me," she said, "once you know what's happening." And with that, she left. About 20 minutes later, I heard Hannah's car pull up. She didn't even bother using the garage. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I stayed in my office as she came in. She walked right into the room and sat down across from me. "Jacob, she started. "Not interested." I cut her off. "Actually, uninteresting." I corrected myself, cutting her off. "I don't even want to know. I don't want to hear a single word from you." I glared at Hannah, barely able to contain my anger. "You lied to me for 9 damn years. Not one of those children is mine, and you had the nerve to convince me to get a vasectomy while you were still on birth control, just so you could keep seeing Mark." Her eyes widened in shock as I continued. "So no, Hannah, I don't care what you have to say anymore. If there's anything you think I should know, talk to my lawyer. Her contact information is in the package you got when you were served." "What about the children?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What children?" I shot back, bitterness dripping from every word. "I don't have any children, and if it were up to you, I never would have. I could ask why you did this, but I'm not interested in your lies or your pathetic excuses. I just want this to end so I can pick up what's left of my life and move on." Without warning, I called the au pair into the room, knowing she could hear everything from the hallway. "You're fired," I stated bluntly. "Leave now." "What?" she exclaimed, her face pale with shock. "Why?" "Because you covered for her," I spat, pointing at Hannah. "You knew she was screwing around with her boss. I don't know if you knew the kids weren't mine. But I have video evidence of you discussing the children with Mark. Get out. Hannah stepped in, her voice rising. Jacob, you can't fire her. I'm the one who pays her salary. The au pair shot a grateful look at Hannah, clearly hoping she'd save her job. Fine, I conceded. But I've already contacted the agency and let them know you were complicit in an extramarital affair. If Hannah wants to keep you, she'll need to handle everything. Your salary, taxes, benefits, everything. As far as the agency is concerned, you're done. The au pair's face went white as she realized how serious this was. Without the agency's backing, she'd have a hard time finding work again. She hurried out of the room without another word. Did you really have to do that? Hannah asked, her voice a mix of shock and disappointment. You started talking again. I snapped. I told you I don't want to hear it. What I want is for you to gather your things, take your kids, and get out of my house. This is my home too, she protested. According to the documents. No, I interrupted, raising my voice. It's registered solely in my name. Until the courts say otherwise, get out. My voice was so loud that it startled her, and at that moment, Owen walked in. Mommy, he said quietly. Lily fell. Hannah, her face stricken with a mix of guilt and tears, stood up and went to check on Lily. I stayed in my office, closing the door behind me, and waited as she packed. A few minutes later, she came back, holding Lily in her arms. Are you going to say goodbye to her? She asked softly. Not like this, I said, my heart hardening. She's not my daughter, and he's not my son. Take them to Daddy Mark and let him take care of his kids. They're nothing to me now. Jacob, get out, I said firmly, cutting her off again. I heard the front door close, and moments later, the sound of her car starting. She was gone. I let out a long breath, feeling like I'd been holding it for hours. My legs gave out and I collapsed into my chair. I didn't even hear the door open again, and I flinched when I felt arms wrap around me. I buried my head in my hands, trying to block out the world. When I finally looked up, it was Emily, holding me tightly. She didn't say a word, just pulled me closer, and I broke down in her arms. I cried harder than I had in years, letting all the pain pour out. It took a while, but eventually I managed to pull myself together. I had just thrown away 9 years of my life. My marriage, the kids I thought were mine, my entire world, it was all gone. I can't face the world right now, I muttered, the weight of it all crashing down on me again. Emily stepped up like she always did. Let's go, she said calmly. Rachel said Hannah could file for an emergency order to get the house back because of the kids and the fact that it's technically your matrimonial home. It could take about 4 hours. Do you really want to let her waltz back in here and throw you out of your own house? She was right as always. We quickly gathered some clothes, important documents, and anything else I couldn't afford to leave behind. I didn't know where I'd stay, but for now, we loaded my car and hers with whatever we could carry and left. Our first stop was the office, where I had been served. Later that afternoon, Rachel called with an update. Not only had Hannah been granted temporary occupancy of the house, but there was also a restraining order barring me from coming within 100 meters of it. If I needed to retrieve anything else, I'd have to arrange it through her attorney, at my own expense, of course. Completely thrown by how quickly things had spiraled, I found myself back in Emily's spare room, my clothes in her closet, my documents neatly organized in her office. It had been a week since Hannah had filed for divorce. During the day, I'd go to work, and in the evenings, I'd return with Emily to her place. She'd make us dinner, and I'd crash in the spare room. Our interactions felt the same, professional, distant, like nothing had changed except for that one comforting hug after my first breakdown. There wasn't much to smile about, but Emily stayed her usual, calm self. On Monday morning, we met with lawyers representing Hannah's and Mark's employer. I didn't fully understand the details, but it seemed we'd filed a claim for an amount that would bankrupt the company if they couldn't cover it. Their lawyers were all business, but Rachel looked pleased. What's the next step? One of their lawyers asked. Rachel replied without hesitation. Immediate and permanent dismissal of the senior member involved, with complete loss of pension benefits. As for Hannah, she remains on staff for 3 years, with a payout of $1.5 million. I found myself drifting as they discussed the terms. In the end, they came to an agreement, although my share got reduced to $750,000. It was enough to take a chunk out of my debt to the company's pension fund, so I couldn't complain. Payment will be made after the divorce is finalized, Rachel said firmly. The other side nodded, understanding the deal. Rachel stayed with us through the next meeting with Mark Reynolds' lawyers. I left their office $500,000 richer, finally enough to pay off the pension loan and keep a small reserve for the aftermath of the divorce. The last meeting of the day was with Hannah's lawyers. She was there too, but she didn't dare look at me when I walked in. Emily and Rachel sat beside me as her lawyer began speaking. The financial demands in this divorce petition are extreme, he said, launching into a list of my assets. CEO, majority shareholder of a company worth about $20 million, savings, home equity. Rachel cut him off without missing a beat, handing over a set of papers. As per the prenuptial agreement, the company isn't divisible in this divorce, she explained. My client has recently invested most of his savings, 401k, and home equity into another business, and he borrowed from the company's pension fund. His salary has been reduced significantly, and right now he earns less than your client. I'll be filing for temporary spousal support until he can get back on his feet. And the children? Hannah's lawyer pressed. DNA tests have proven they're not his. Rachel replied, her tone sharp. Your client falsified birth records to fraudulently name him as the father. We're also seeking damages for coercing him into sterilization under the pretense of false paternity. Rachel didn't flinch as she laid out our terms. Your client can accept the divorce, vacate the home, and take half of the joint account, which stands at $9,443.15. Hannah's lawyer looked over the papers, then exchanged a glance with her. Finally, Hannah turned toward me, her voice trembling. Jacob, please, she began. 9 years, I said, cutting her off coldly. 9 damn years. Every single day, you lied to me. There's nothing you could say now that I want to hear. She looked back at her lawyer, then nodded. After what seemed like a lifetime, she signed the papers. I wasn't there when she moved out of the house. Instead, I received a formal letter from her lawyer confirming the restraining order had been lifted and the house had been transferred to me. But instead of moving back, I decided to put the house up for sale. It wouldn't cover all my debts, but I could bridge the gap and keep the bank satisfied. 2 months passed, and I was still living in Emily's spare room. And I had gone back to live with her parents after the divorce. Despite all the evidence I presented, they stood by her and refused to have anything to do with me. Honestly, I didn't care. It wasn't much of a loss. Lauren, on the other hand, hadn't followed through with divorcing Mark as she had once promised. I didn't ask for the details, but apparently after Mark lost his corporate job and pension, they had to sell their house and move into a small apartment. He'd managed to find another job, thanks to his industry connections, but it wasn't anywhere near what he used to earn. I didn't know or care if Hannah and Lauren ever crossed paths after that day. I was sitting at my desk trying to focus on work when Emily knocked and walked in without waiting for a response. Mark Reynolds is dead, she said bluntly. I blinked, caught off guard. What? Lauren caught him with Hannah again. She explained, her tone matter of fact. She shot him. I leaned back in my chair, and despite myself, a grin spread across my face. I couldn't help it. I tried to hold it in, but it was impossible. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, I finally said. Emily chuckled. You're not mad at me for feeling happy about this, are you? I asked, not sure how she'd react. Not at all, she replied with a smile. That idiot got exactly what he deserved. She placed an envelope on my desk. By the way, this came for you. We both knew what it was. I picked it up and opened it. That's it, I said quietly. I'm finally a free man. Finally, Emily echoed, her voice soft. Then unexpectedly, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't just a brief kiss either. It was full, passionate, and completely caught me off guard. When she pulled back, I could only sit there, stunned and breathless. For 9 years, she said quietly, I've been by your side. You're the most honorable man I've ever known. You never once made an inappropriate move or crossed a line, and I respected you for that. I've been waiting for this moment for 9 years. Now that you're free, I want to show you that not all women are like her. We make a great team, Jacob. I know you inside and out, just like any wife knows her husband. And you know me too. Please, give me a chance to prove that to you. I was speechless. All the memories of working side by side with Emily, the bond we'd formed long before Hannah's betrayal came to light, flooded my mind. I realized then that I had feelings for her. Genuine feelings I'd been suppressing all along. I didn't have to question them anymore. They were clear. Do you have anything to say? She asked, concern flickering across her face, a rare sight for Emily. How many? I asked, my voice steady. Confusion flashed in her eyes. How many what? Children. I clarified. How many children should we have? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. New cheating wife stories tomorrow.